Greetings! This is Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. Are you ready to dive back into the world of darkness once more and chat about Mage The Ascension? Yep, we're diving back into Mage. We're going to be talking about the Technocracy today and the Progenitors. So if you're joining, of course, with me live on Twitch, that's over there, say hi. And of course, if you're joining me later on YouTube, just remember to do all that algorithm stuff, ringing the bell, liking, all that kind of stuff. Yes, we're diving into the Progenitors today. My question, of course, is, have you dealt directly with Progenitors in any of your Mage games or World of Darkness games? I'm just interested in your stories around the Progenitors when it comes to the Technocratic Union. Anyway, why don't we dive into the place I like to start with this, which is sources. Because I always recommend the Wikipedia sites for a lot of information, especially like Wolf Wikipedia is very good for a lot of information. But I understand that, that doesn't give everything. It does give a good view, and you want to check out some books. And of course, the Technocracy book is a very good place to look into things. There's the Technocracy Progenitors, the source book, and of course the convention book for Progenitors, a little neighbor one. And in the Mage The Ascension Companion, they do provide a couple bits of information based upon their group specifically, and Technocracy in general. So who are the Progenitors? Well, Progenitors are particularly the doctors and people that work with medicine within the Technocracy. They are the people dedicated to biological sciences. They master the spheres of life. They have genetic manipulation, hyper-advanced surgical techniques, sophisticated drugs. They push medicine to its very close edge. And oftentimes they will work closely with Iteration X when it comes to things like cyber technology and artificial body parts. Now, if we talk about their patagram, they believe that the most fit must survive. Evolution teaches us that better adapted organisms will always displace those that are less fit. The difference between Neanderthals and humans were minuscule. Neanderthals made tools, had social structures, language, but humans' ancestors were just a bit more efficient. Neanderthals kind of got either integrated or died off. And now, with them, they possess the power to make humans better adapt, more fit, more likely to survive. And they must use that power wisely. It is a gift that they must give to humanity. And to do things like gift humanity with immortality must be used perfectly. Perfection and unity is required to reach that level. So life itself is their purview. All that changes, and all that they look to the wonders of the universe through life itself. Amongst Technocracy, the Progenitors are the most vehement in their dislike of reality deviants, other mages. They hate New Age healing, homeopathy, holistics, superstitions. They see dangers, not only for the whole of humanity, but teaching masses to rely on powers of elitist mages and charlatans instead of relying on comprehensible forces that should be and will be amenable to everyone. That's kind of a view of why they impact the deviants pretty well. Here's a Progenitor card from Rage. We can enjoy this for a little while as we talk about their history. So, if we look to the modern Progenitors and where we can trace them back to, it begins with Hippocrates, the designer of the Hippocratic Oath. And also, according to Progenitors' histories, an enlightened physician. He found a small guild of apprentices, the Kosian Circle. The Roman Empire widened the Kosian sphere of influence until they could be found throughout Europe, Africa, and Asia Minor. Under the influence of Galenic medical theory based on astrology and the four humors, they came to dominate the Roman world. They could not drive out many of the folk remedies of the empire. They could at least discredit them. Simian messengers traveled throughout the Sassanid Empire and along trade routes to China, contacting like-minded individuals wherever they could. Now we reach the Dark Ages. The Kosian's influence started to wane in the 4th century, of course, failing as ancient learning vanished in an increasing barbaric world. Christian saints and stories featuring miraculous healing, and the Christian distrust of magic and astrology through increased doubt of the validity of physicians' craft. When the Western half of the empire collapsed, the Kosian circle broke. The Western Roman Kosians were forced into hiding, while the Eastern Roman Kosians splintered in many smaller guilds. By the time of Justinian, the mighty Byzantine Kosians had dwindled to a single circle. Scattered throughout the Mediterranean, Hippocratic physicians nursed their bile for the next 7 centuries, preserving the shreds of Gaelic throughout the Arabic and Latin universities. So basically, they just held on what little they had during this time. Now we reach the Convention of the White Tower. The Kosakin Circle joined forces with the Order of Reason, believing that the dependency on magic and faith was the main reason that human suffering, turning into the Hippocratic Circle. By 1350, the Hippocratic Circle was combating the plague in public hospitals. Members warred with the church and folk healers, which were of course backed by cloisters and verbena, respectively, but the classical pedigree of their teachings won them the intellectual of Europe, and hence the support of increasing secular governments. The circle was divided into houses that would later provide the modern methodologies. The House of Mandrake studied herbalism and agriculture. House of Fire was some of the original field scientists tracing and eradicating plagues. House of Knights pioneered surgery. The Phylaxory were the warriors protecting the circle during travel from bandits, warring nobles, and armed superstitionists. Now we reach the Victorian Age and the Asclepian Order. This was a shift in Hippocratic philosophy. Galenic theory possessed too many defects and was closely allied to Hermetic thought to be safe. The circle's leader embraced germ theory and genetics and turned the convention to a new goal. The modification, they turned towards modification, not only preservation of life. And in 1851, the Hippocratic Circle and the larger order underwent the reorganization and emerged as a Technocratic Union. Hey, basically, right before the Technocratic Union emerged, they were shifting on their own. The circle was re-Christian, of course, as I mentioned, the Asclepian Order. This lasted until later years of the 19th century, when the Union overhauled itself again, and the Asclepians became the Progenitors. But during this Victorian Age, the Progenitors had to fight with various dissidents of their own ranks. Eugenics, sexism, the infamous Promethean atrocities, which were the creation of monsters, and the animation of dead flesh, crept into the convention, fueled by the sheer possibilities of a new era. Many Progenitors experimented for some time in these branches, but few stayed for too long. So there was a lot of darker things happening during this time. This convention was then again shook once more when World War I occurred, and had a severe damp on their idealism. They saw the atrocities that the masses had unleashed and knew horrible ways to kill each other. Many progenitors withdrew from the mundane world, searching desperately for cures to gas attacks and their alike. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s was a crude awakening to the agricultural experts within their convention, and the rapid rush to introduce mechanized farming practices with unequal encouragement of sustainable crop practices. Combined with the drought, the blizzards of soil-filled winds were the stuff of their nightmares. The dysphoria was created of the farmers displaced from their barren lands in the midst of economic misery of the Great Depression. Then World War II began, and the technocrats allied themselves with the Council of Nine to fight back against the Nephantic incursions. Most of the progenitors had fled from the horrors of the consensus into their safe labs, content to watch the world from the outside, instead of suffering within. Then we reached the Cold War. The progenitors supported various equalist rights and profited greatly from the consensus accepted by their theory of DNA, making many of their enchantments mundane and profitable for masses. By the 1990s, bioethics was starting to see pointed, widespread attention in the masses. At the same time, the technocracy demanded that the progenitors would aid them aid the iterators in the construction of hit marks. There were some objections. The Progenitors at least joined in the project to create artificial soldiers for the Ascension. Before the dimensional anomaly cut them off, the most elite Progenitors secluded themselves in the Horizon realms, slowly losing touch with the needs of the masses and controlling the conventions from Horizon. Now reaching the final nights, the Progenitors are without the majority of their brightest scientists. But many have accepted this as a necessity to begin anew. Seeing how the infighting and seclusion only brought them wider apart from the needs of humanity, most Progenitors nowadays have chosen to embrace fieldwork over secluded studies. This resulted in a mass shift of attention towards Progenitor-run hospitals and healthcare and a back to the root sentiment among the younger generation of them. Many feel that their forebears betrayed the Hippocratic principles and sought to reconnect the convention with its traditions. Even now, remaining traditionalists are careful to subvert Progenitor activities, as many sleepers profit greatly from their hospitals. So, yeah. Now, their convention is divided up into 3 bands. Scientists, who often call themselves the talents or other self-inflated terms, management, and support staff. Beyond that, there are levels that we can talk about. So, yes, the main people are your scientists. They do a lot of the field work. You've got your management and support staff, which are, running everything on the sides. We have students. They're entry-level perspectives to being a Progenitor scientists. With very rare exceptions, they are newly enlightened, I should say. They're extraordinary, on the cusp of achieving genius. In order to be considered inclusion as a Progenitor, and have a Progenitor-funded program of study, the student must demonstrate uncommon comprehension of one of the root sciences of the convention, usually biology or chemistry. After they complete their studies and defend their theses, they graduate into the rank of research assistant, the second level of the lab. Their initial work in researching the investigatory paths is set upon by their superiors. Once they prove their abilities a few times, they're rewarded with some determination of their own efforts. So it's sort of like, you gotta work on some other people's stuff for a little while, you prove yourself, now you can choose what you want to work on. The brightest and most ambitious research assistants graduate with more authority and responsibility, becoming prime investigators. These are the brilliant minds who repeatedly prove themselves with an increased responsibility. Primary investigators decide the course of research taken by the labs, RAs under their control, though they're still constrained by fields of study and occasionally meddling by research directors, which are a slightly different breed of scientists. To be sure, they have astounding knowledge regarding their chosen field of study, but either the desire to research has cooled over the many decades of their long lives, or they have both the ability and desire to run facilities under their command. Basically, either they're like, I want to be in administration, or they're like, you know what, I can also be in administration, and I want to guide people on my direction. They guide research efforts of the facilities and personnel at their command. They generally do not get involved in planning individuals' line of research, but focus on strategic levels of scientific inquiry. Counselors are masters of the convention and part of the shared government that counsels and guides their convention. Recruiters are talent scouts for the convention. Their job demands a mastery of science at the same time, at least of level of the primary investigators, because then they couldn't pick appropriate people from amongst them when they're going. Along with the iterators, the Progenitors also provide the Union with many great foot soldiers, genetically engineered clones designed to replace civilians as a stalwart, and are bioengineered horrors that guard the most secret technocratic labs. So there's a lot that they do, and you can see the different levels there too. And these are just, most of those groups are the scientist groups, not the management and support. Now let's talk about their methodologies, because there are a number of them they have. There is I'm going to list them all and then talk a little bit about each of them. Agronomists, the applied scientists, which have some subsets to them. Facade, I'm never going to say it right. The facade engineers, God, good. It's not going to work in my brain, I'm sorry. But they're that engineers. The gene engineers, pharmacopiists, preservationists, these are some hell words, psychopharmacists, pharmacopiists, charlatan society. Oh my god, these are names. These are names that they have. I'm sorry, these guys have given themselves hella names. Let's talk about these. God. So there are some smaller, less funded avenues of progenitors. They are known as the micro-methodologies. So I'm going to talk about the 4 of them that are the divisions here, which include the agronomists. So it's basically, there are 3 main methodologies. The facade, it just doesn't want to come out my brain. I know it's not correct, but it doesn't want to come out my brain. Wait a second. Oh, wait. Listen here. Facade. Oh my god. Thank you. I had to listen to it. Facade. It wasn't coming out in my brain. The comedy of this episode is already increased. Sorry, everybody. The facade engineers, gene engineers, and pharmacopiists are the main 3 methodologies you see out of all of those. Many scientific leaves, such as veterinary medicine, agriculture, ecology, fall outside those larger structures and end up in smaller organizations that fill the gaps. These micro-methodologies, by the larger, are smug, better-funded methodologies than full methodologies in their own right, just at a smaller scale. So they're still getting... It's smaller than proportional funding from the syndicate, basically. There are even a few scientists who do not fit into one of these micro-methodologies. The enlightened geologists and paleontologists, for example, are so few that they do not even have a group identity or name. The Shared Governance Council gives a small stipend for their research and generally encourages them to find ways into more rewarding positions within the convention. These suggestions usually go unheeded. Like most progenitors and micro-methodologies, they have a passion for study and can spend many happy years in dig sites and museum libraries. Okay. Agronomists. They focus on agriculture and botany. By common admission, a boring subject. They understand their subject is boring. They're like, look, I understand it's not the most exciting thing. We like it, but I understand you guys don't. It is vital for the survival of the masses. They often combine their knowledge with gene engineer techniques to introduce more advanced crops to the consensus. So yeah, they are definitely in a position where they know they're important. They know it's not a very, fancy thing, but it's there. The Shilatarian Society, named after Shilatara, who, just as a quick note, is a veterinary writer, and had some important work in history. Go check that out. They're the scientists of veterinary medicine. They're found often where people depend on animals for their daily work. Their studies in epidemics that affect animals are somewhat appropriated by the pharmacopiists when they begin to affect humans, like in the case of the bird and swine flu, but otherwise, yes, they're the veterinary science group. They have an importance, but they're just not the same thing. The preservationists work to convince humanity to adopt green and environmental alternatives to current technology. Seeing that widespread pollution on the Earth is the fault of the order of reason during industrialization, they research why the consensus seems to reject the concepts like clean energy. To this end, they've been working in relationship with the New World Order. And then the pharmacopoeists, originally a branch of the psychopharmacopeutionists, was originally a branch of the pharmacopeutionists. They split in the 1960s by a vote of administration. They act as therapists and counselors to the Union, and see their techniques in contrast to more aggressive methods expounded by New World Order. Nonetheless, they cooperate them in those matters of studying mind procedures and finding new ways to convert stubborn reality deviants. Besides that, their study also concerns enlightenment. So these are 4 of the micro-methodologies that we can kind of talk about here. God. Now we have the applied sciences we can talk about, which are loose confederations of amalgams within the progenitors and take their scientists into the field. So yes, these are, again, something that's not quite like one of the micro methodologies, or the even micro methodologies, but something on their own. The concept of the action scientists existed before, but the progenitors before the anomaly were content to spend their time in laboratories and leave field work to the other conventions. In loss of research stations, applied scientists found themselves to be the experts on life in the frontiers, and their expertise raised the status of several of the progenitors that remained safely on Earth. So this is basically the dudes that went into the field that were ignored by a lot of the other parts of the convention. Now, they're big in the group. In 2008, applied science was officially recognized by the Shared Governance Council, and new leadership of the progenitors left on Earth. So basically, they were just sort of there helping out everybody else, and now they're their own group that's not really, like, the same as the others, but they're important. While they've had several attempts to reorganize them into their own methodology, the amalgam resists, fearing that it would lead to restriction of funding and demoting of one of the micro-methodologies. They also clamor for reinstitution of the Pilgrim to fight the growing power of reality deviants. They again, hatred of reality deviants, they want to go hunt them some more. So, applied science have really set out to use the technologies developed in the labs and quickly expand into fighting reality deviants that sought to poison the sleepers with false cures, be they vampires, traditionalists, or others. They also became outspoken critics of the activities of the Union, particularly the Syndicate. The old masters were usually content with allowing the youngsters to blow off steam, believing that they would eventually return to the labs. There is a general sense of community across the applied science, which makes complete sense for groups that they must band together and defend themselves from outside political pressures. There's even a sense of culture. They idealize science heroes in fictions, from Doc Savage to Bones McCoy to Atomic Robo, even when these heroes have nothing to do with life science. So they are divided into several specialized amalgams across all methodologies. And those are deviancy scene investigators, biosphere explorers, damage control with ethical compliances under that, and Medicians sans superstition. Let's talk about each of these a little bit because they are part of applied scientists. The biosphere's explorers work to catalog undiscovered animals and plants on Earth. Having strong relations to the void engineers as well as the pharmacopoeists, progenitors of this amalgam are found nearly all over the globe and often forced to work in near isolation for months. The deviancy scene investigators lead the forensic abilities of investigation and security, often cooperating with New World Order, the damage control for that purposes. They use their skills to discover realities, plan investigation, and neutralize targets like werewolves. So dangerous targets. Damage control is the oldest and most prestigious of the applied science. Originating in the phylaxi of the old Hippocratic Circle, damage control is used to dispatch force from the administration, with the geoengineers having special jurisdictions about them. With the loss of administration, damage control now works independently. They target test subjects that escape progenitor labs, fight Nefandi and Infernalists, and have invested the convention and keep progenitors' tech out of the eyes of sleepers. Beneath that is the subsection of ethical compliance, which keep the excess that marked the later years of the 20th century to a minimum. They deal with rogue elements within the convention and make sure the often neglected Hippocratic oath is taken seriously. The Medicians sans superstition is the second oldest amalgam. They focus on curing the sick who live in the regions where medical care is rare. In most of these places, people fall back on superstitions, strengthening reality deviance and encouraging the prey of humanity. The Medicines sans superstitions seek to bring technology paradigms to these people and defend them against those that would exploit. Alright. Now, we got 3 more individuals here. The main methodologies. We've talked about the micro methodologies. We've talked about the other ones there. The amalgams there. So let's start with, of course, the forced adaptation and clone alteration developed eugenics. The FACADE engineers. Their methodology specialize in cloning, focusing on life and entropy. Their origin is uncertain. There's speak of members of the Costing Circle that operate in Egypt responsible for the myths of the animal-headed gods and chimera, like the Minotaur and stuff like that. Basically, the Orders of Dreams managed to discover the last remnants of these scientists and offered them a place in the organization, allowing them to assume the name of Shurgens. These Costians entered the Order and stayed in obscurity until the Great House came. The forced adaptation, clone alteration, development, eugenics, as they call themselves now, were vital for the pogrom, for fighting and hunting the alley deviants. Among them, they were involved in the Hitmark program and manufacture of several men in black. They created their hybrid monsters as guardians and used cloning technology to undermine both the traditions and members of the Union that they deemed too close to the traditions. With the pogrom now lessened and control lost behind the anomaly, they hope to focus more on peaceful endeavors. So it's sort of like they just used their stuff because it was what it was. They don't mind peaceful things, too. So, oh my god, it's off my brain again. I'm bringing it back, Don't worry about it. Facade. God. Facade. Keep it in my brain. Facade. I see that word and I want to say facade. Facade originally operated in total secrecy. No one besides the administration could control knew their full extent of their cloning programs and their activities. Several of their members completely retreated in their laboratories, dedicating themselves to research, surrounding themselves with clones of themselves. The anomaly blocked off the way to most off-world constructs. Facade became much more open, and even if they are still keeping some of their secrets. They once had the goal of perfecting humanity through selective cloning, hence the eugenics part of their name. Following World War II, eugenics became a disreputable subject, and Facade officially rescinded it, although individual members still pursued it. In modern times, Facade has mainly worked to introduce safe cloning to the masses, the first subject being the first 3D printed organ. Despite their small numbers, they receive a disproportionately large funding. This is in part because the other conventions know that they depend on them. The New World Order could not run their affairs without a steady supply of cloned and disposable agents. Old technocrats depended on Facade to extend their lives or clone them bodies for their minds to inhabit. Clones produced by Facade are classified in 3 categories. Type 1s are crude constructs designed to infiltrate sleeper societies. Their personalities unravel in a couple of years, and their patterns have inconsistencies that a skilled mage can use to detect. Type 2 are perfect copies, down to life and mind patterns. They're reserved for senior members of the Union, are sources of immortality the progenitors seem to offer. Type 3 is a recently undiscovered type. These clones consist of multiple bodies and are connected by one singular mind. That's the Facade. Now we can talk about the Gene Engineers. Another major methodology. They study genetics. They focus on life sphere. They originated in the, oh my god, hematologists of the Hippocratic Circle, who originally studied blood and how it moved through the veins and arteries. With the advances of Mendev and Gavani, they expanded their interest into how specific traits were transmitted and evolved over generations. They renamed themselves the Mutagenic Engineers. Their work advanced through the discovery of the double helix in DNA. Believing they have found what the Costing Searcher was searching for, the Mutagenic Engineers chose to rename themselves Gene Engineers in the conference held in 1954. Modern ones have taken up the mantle of biological resource to allow Facade to focus itself on cloning. The main focus is the Human Genome Project, which they have hoped to gain complete control over the human body and eventually understanding every life form that has ever existed. This will eventually unlock the key to ascension. The Gene Engineers frequently interact with the masses, often with the intellectia of biological sciences, for their studies. With this, they make sure that every aspect of modern science is well represented in their ranks, and greatly value cross-disciplinary studies with other methodologies. Unfortunately, also opens them to infiltration. This methodology has been undermined several times by traditional infiltrators who use their contact with sleepers for their own gain. During the pogrom, many of the Gene Engineers' creations were used as war beasts and guardians, and the methodology invested heavily in biological weaponry, genetic enhancements for agents. The recklessness is even seen with suspicion within the Technocracy. This led to many detractors to speak of realms modeled after antebellum slave plantations, dark uses for the Human Genome Project, and other abominations. In recent times, the Gene Engineers have tried to brighten their image by focusing on cancer research and genetic disorders, but the rest of the convention watches their activities carefully. Damage control used to be under the Jorg systems of the gene engineers before they were folded into applied scientists in the wake of the reorganization. This was in large part since there were creations of the gene engineers that demanded damage control's interference. So basically, gene engineers, with their seemingly corruption having the damage control into them, it worked during, the hunting stuff. Now it's, it's just not going to work anymore. And finally is the pharmacopoeists. They focus on interactions between human bodies and foreign chemicals, dealing with life and mind. Again, part of the Hikosian circle, acting as herbalists, alchemists, healers. These early medicines were often confused by the populace for witches, faced persecution during the Dark Ages, where they had to hide their clinics from Croistoniers and Verbena. Many pharmacopoeists believed that they could have cured the Black Death if they'd been allowed to act in open, and have a grudge against superstitions ever since. During the Convention of the White Tower, the splintered Kosians joined the newly founded Hippocratic Circle as the Apothecaries. Seeking other lost branches of the order, they built hospitals, enhanced their infrastructures to allow quick transfer of knowledge. Using their skills, they also supplied the Order of Reason with poisons to use against their enemies. Using scientific advancements, they prospered, and medical science allowed them to cure many influences that were previously fatal. In the 1950s, the pharmacopoeists entered a feud with the gene engineers. Prominent members of the revitalized methodology accused the pharmacopoeists of being outdated, with their methods being little better than those of the traditionalists. The resulting feud drove the pharmacopoeists to organize crime in the 1970s. The New World Order had arranged for the methodology to keep an eye on new criminal gangs and the distribution of dangerous drugs to the masses. The pharmacopoeists instead found an avenue full of lab rats for the newest products. They themselves claimed they've been pushed by the greed of the syndicate, and even post-anomaly they work closely with them, since their work provides one of the largest funding for the Union. The pharmacopoeists have many trappings of a syndicate endeavor. Yeah! Turns out working with the syndicate, yeah. Legal laboratories work in the first world. Creations of their products takes place in less developed countries and are shipped back to be distributed. This makes them one of the richest methodologies among the progenitors and a result of much envy. So yeah, they develop their products in the first world, develop them, have them created in less developed countries, and ship them back to be distributed. The reputation of the methodology is hardly impeccable. The pharmacopoeists are blamed by many to have made the drugs harmful by alleviating consensus and keeping the real drugs without malicious side effects for themselves. To have introduced alcoholism and designer drugs into society, using drugs to manipulate sleeper society, like the opium worms, and have had in meat plants, fertilization industries, pesticides creations, and control popular soft drink and cigarette brands. Their defenders do point to penicillin, vaccines for diseases like smallpox to AIDS, treatments for chronic and terminal conditions like heart disease and cancer. So it's like they're a two-sided group that they've created some great things, but also done some really awful things. Pessimistic pharmacopoeists believe that man is an ape, and that the constant search for more efficient drugs and narcotics is proof of the sleepers not only do not want to be enlightened, they do not even want to be sentient. Some in even Fargo to state that pharmacopoeists activity works to kill the sleeper's avatar of every sleeper through exposure to their drugs, chems, and similar tools. The methodology denies this, and ethical compliance is always on the prowl for those within their ranks who attempt to subjugate the masses. Yeah. Finally, there are a number of companies that work with the progenitors. As a whole, corporate works with them. Clark County Forensic Department, the strangely privileged CSI team of Las Vegas, Deep Green Thinking, a think tank that is technically part of Ethan Biology Department of the University of Chicago, the Health Bomb Mobile Clinic, a bus that travels between nursing neighborhoods, seeing the health needs of the impoverished and undeserved, San Mondo, a sustainable agricultural company, originally a producer of pesticides. The company has become a biotech giant. Whistler Industrial Sanitation Engineering, remedification firm that operates across Europe and Northern Africa, and quality assurance and human resource consulting firm. So all these organizations are technically working with the progenitors directly. So it's, you have to think, they've got their hands in a lot of stuff. Those are just examples to give you an idea of where they have their hands. And that's an important thing to think about for the progenitors, because they are the group that works the most heavily with the masses. Doctors, people that create our medications, and a lot of other stuff we have. All of them, there's medications for them. Many of our medical techniques have come from them. And we can understand why they hate reality deviants. You know, reality deviants bring superstition. That's against what they want. They want science very heavily, because that superstition leads to superstitious medicine. And in the end, well, yes, the paradigm has kind of ended for now, but they want it back. They want to end these deviants. They want their medical sciences back on top. They're an interesting group. Genetics, surgery, drugs, all hyper-advanced, powerful, biological monstrosities that they create. Genetically engineered monsters, weapons. The thing is, they do use their techniques as both a shield and a sword very heavily. And now, there is a little bit of restructuring and reorganizing the way that they work, and certainly hiding in a lab isn't something that's popular anymore. Getting out there and learning and doing field work is more important. And certainly working with groups like within their own ranks, like the applied sciences, is becoming more important for a lot of the methodologies. And yes, they have a lot of these micro methodologies, and even the micro methodologies that you can see delve into certain sciences and techniques and ideas. It's all about the research. It's all about the discovery. And much more so than a lot of the other groups within the Technocracy, they are very pure science. Though they do understand the need to connect with others, too. They're not against that. And they've come a long way. So they're an interesting group. Probably the least group that you, if you're playing a mage, member of the conventions, would want to meet. They're the one that's most likely going to turn against you. Not to say they haven't worked together, things like with World War II, but that's the entire conventions. And you have to remember, during World War II, the progenitors weren't really as involved. They took a step back. That explains why a lot of the other members of the Technocracy Union are much closer to thinking the war against the mages is not as important anymore. We worked together in the past. We can find a general consensus nowadays. Leave you on your own. There might be a time to fight things like Nephanthi and diabolic problems, especially with how things are nowadays. Practicality is not seen by the generators. Again, maybe nowadays, the modern one, those hardliners are deep in there still. Not all of them are cut off. And progenitors are an interesting one to talk about, and I hope you enjoyed learning all about them. They're a fun one within the Technocracy, because they've got a lot of interesting things about them. So, if you want to see more of my stuff, always make sure to check it out. I go live, usually on Twitch. That's usually Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Fridays are my World of Darkness day. Usually about early afternoon to mid-afternoon. All that stuff goes up on YouTube. All my other tabletop stuff goes up on YouTube. The other gaming stuff on Twitch does. So if you want to watch that stuff and join me for some fun and games, you can do that too. Crimson Queen, that's my live play of a role-playing game right now. On Wednesdays, 9 p.m. We're doing Pathfinder for that game. Check that out. I've got older World of Darkness games. You can always check it out on the channel. Discussing tabletop on Saturdays at 6. Check that out. Social media is linked down below for all my places that you can check me out. Usually cat pics and updates on stuff. And that's about it. Okay, everybody, I'm going to get going. I hope you enjoyed all of this and learned a few things. I'll be back with more tabletop stuff in the future. But until that next time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.